Ready graphics? Ready theme?
Good evening. For your information tonight.
We talk Sybil.
Should we talk Sybil, please?
Shall we talk Sybil?
I mean, I don't know what you want to talk about, Sybil. We would love to hear anything
about
also,
Sybil.
We can turn off the mics and you can tell us stuff about
Talk
Sybil.
for real about Sybil.
That you don't want to talk about. But that is up to you.
How much do you want to know?
Everything.
Hi, I'm Jessie Mullins.
And I'm Lauren Milberger.
And this is FYI, the Murphy Brown Podcast. Hopefully you listened to part 1.
Please go back and listen to part 1.
We hope you enjoy this one. Please let us know. You can find us on social media at Murphy Brown Pod, website murphybrownpod.com, or you can email us at murphybrownpod@gmail.com. Please enjoy. Russ Woody.
Bye.
Bye.
I have a question for, I know we also want to ask you about your time on Sybil, because we both loved it so much.
Love it.
We also grew up on that. But before we get to that, I actually want to ask, we've so far only talked to writers who were part of a duo, part of a writing team.
Oh.
And
true.
I wonder what that was like for you as often credited as a single writer, what it was like for you in the room and working that way, not having the person to shout at across the room.
I think it's the same for those guys who are partnered, because in the room everybody's on their own, so it's kind of the same thing. But actually, Tom Seeley and I were partnered for a while, years before Murphy, and it was very amicable. We went separate ways, and then we ended up on Murphy together. So and we're great friends. But here's my problem with the teams are great, especially for comedy, because you need somebody to kind of bounce things off of with comedy. But what I don't like is very often I'll come up with something that I know isn't quite there, but I can't even describe it. But it's a thing that's kind of there, and I know I can get to it. I know I can get to it if I just let it fester in my brain. If you have a partner, you can't do that. You say, I got a thing, but I can't tell you what it is. They go, that doesn't do us any good at all. And I love the individuality. When you're with a partner, you have to meet at a certain time together, so you have to obligate your time. And wait, do you guys write together?
No,
we haven't.
But we were thinking, I think we're both thinking the fact that that's how the podcast works.
Yes.
Oh.
We have to be here together to do this.
Yes. Yeah. We can't, it doesn't work for us to have a conversation at 2 different times and then just ADR it in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I did once try to work with someone, and the problem was I wrote ahead of them because they were a little bit slower than I was, and I wish I'm not that fast anymore. But and so that's when I sort of realized that I couldn't, based on that situation, that I couldn't work with a partner because my brain was just going a little bit faster and not even faster than another person, but my ideas were already sort of going, and I wasn't able to pause myself to come back and meet with that person, and so I wrote too much.
I found in the theater company I work with, when we write, we do like kind of monthly sketch and small scene work, and I found that I usually write by myself. We also have a kind of our own writer's room as a jury process where our pieces go through and we get feedback. But when I have worked with someone, it's always been when I'm trying to write a style that I don't normally write in. I have a fellow writer who she just writes the really big, kind of insane high concept scenes so easily, and I'll have the concept and the idea for it, but a lot of mine tends to be banter and patter, and more of a natural conversation style. So I'm like, I want to go there. I don't want to neuter it by writing it by myself, because I feel like there's this attack or approach that I haven't quite nailed down yet, and I'll go to her. I'll go to somebody who does that style really well, and then run it past them.
Yeah.
But it usually comes from, I've already done the vomit draft.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I find a lot of teams, I mean, each team has a different way of working together. Steve and Gary, I think one would, maybe Gary would do the, what's this thing called? The computer. Typing.
The typing on the keys. Yeah.
Yeah. That thing. And, and the other would do the pacing and talking, and they'd throw in with each other. Some writers who are teams do every other scene. And I know of one team this seems like the most insane way to do a team is they would both write a draft of the script. And then
and then compare them?
And they try to figure out whose was the best.
So it's like a competition. That doesn't sound like writing together. That just sounds like competing with each other.
Yeah, I don't know how they don't kill each other.
Yeah, I don't know if I like that.
Though I can also see it. So for me, I think that depends on at what point do they separate to write? How much of it has already been talked out? Like, do they know this is just the inciting incident, go? Or is it that plus we outline this is the structure, now how do we write it? Because then you can kind of weave like a zipper back together.
Yeah, I could see that, but it sounded like...
I want to pick those brains. I want to know how that works.
Yeah.
The typing thing reminded me, there's a documentary coming out that I got to see a rough draft of on Gilda Radner called Love Gilda. I helped a little bit with it. And apparently, which I didn't know until this documentary, that when she was with, I think it was Radio Hour, National Lampoon, she felt like she wasn't able to, as the only woman, get her thoughts out quick enough, that the men were always sort of overpowering to her at the time. And this is obviously the 70s. So she volunteered to type. And as a woman, they thought, oh, of course, she knows how to be a typist.
Yes, women type.
Yeah. And that was her way of being able to type in her jokes first.
Brilliant.
I thought it was so smart.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, to tell you the truth, that's what I did a form of that at Becker when I was there, because I don't think I did really well in the room the first year. It was a lot of loud people. And so I realized at a certain point, if I just took charge of the board, then I was in charge of what went up. And I could turn around and look to people, and say, that's an interesting idea, or that's an interesting idea. Let's go this way or that way. And it gave me control of the room, and a loud, noisy room too, which I don't I don't do well at trying to shout jokes over the top of other people, and some people do it really well. So I just sort of switched gears. But that's really interesting. That's very true. If you control the
minutes,
the keyboard.
Yeah, that little thing where all the fluid has to go through and it gets small. And never mind.
Well, your show's room, I believe that it was Neil Simon's brother. I believe that he used to, because I always get confused which one it was, but one of them used to whisper into someone who was loud, probably Mel Brooks, ear jokes. And then they would say them.
And they would shout them.
And it's in My Favorite Year. There's a character that whispers into someone else's ear and they say the jokes for them.
That's right.
Yeah.
We talk Sybil.
Should we talk Sybil, please?
Shall we talk Sybil?
I mean, I don't know what you want to talk about, Sybil. We would love to hear anything
about Sybil.
Also, we can turn off the mics and you can tell us stuff about
talk
Sybil.
For real about
that
Sybil.
You don't want to talk about, but that is up to you.
How much do you want to know?
Everything.
I'm pretty sure I will say as a child, I'm pretty sure that my mom started to regret introducing me to a character like Marianne.
Yes, we're big Christine Baranski fans.
Yes, and I definitely watched everything my mother did, and of course my mother loved the salty, brassy, rough around the edges women, which made me a ridiculous child trying to pretend to be Marianne.
And also, it's on Amazon Prime right now, and so a couple months ago, I think in the fall, yeah, I binged the entire series again.
Me
and
too.
It's still, oh, that's right, you did.
Yeah.
I forgot. So it still holds up. It's still very funny.
So you guys like that show?
Yes.
And it went through 3 regimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We like Marianne.
Yes, we like Marianne.
All right, well, let's talk about Marianne.
But no, I think one of the things I appreciate about it is that it's not a perfect show, and it definitely has its flaws. But the stuff that works just sings, and it still does, even with regime changes.
I agree, and it's a shame. I kind of think it's a shame what happened to that show. It kind of got destroyed in at least around the 3rd. It was only 3 seasons. But Howard Gould, he and I. Well, I'll start with when I first went in to interview. Jay Daniel was there, and Chuck Lorre, and some others, and.
Was Alan Ball there when you were there?
Yes, he was.
Okay.
He got out of Grace Under Fire because it was a little too crazy for him.
Well, Well, I believe he said that working on Sybil, and so I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but he said is the reason that he wrote American Beauty.
Yes.
That was his break time.
Well, at a certain point, there was nothing for us to do. So Alan, it's fair to say, he made use of his time. He in that first meeting, I was sent in by my agent, and I really wasn't that interested. And I told them why. I said, I had some friends who worked on moonlighting, and I said it was problematic, and Chuck and the other says, "Oh, well, no, Sybil's great. She's great. She's a team player. You say jump, she says how high." I said, "Oh, wow." And so, I ended up going there. And then as Chuck, and, Lee Aronson, Sybil was unhappy with, those guys. And so the scripts were sort of going away until there were no scripts, and Chuck and Lee went away. And then Howard, I'm sitting there talking to Howard, and Howard says, I'm gonna talk to Carsey Warner. I'm gonna step up and take over the show. And I looked at him and I said, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? We're almost out of here." And so he did, and he even promised them we weren't going to take a week down. We weren't going to shut down for a week or two. We were just going to. So we took over on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, I think. That was a multicam show, and we didn't have a script. And we did this thing. We had a notion by somebody. Those are always floating around. And we did this. In those days, it was called a gangbang, where you pitch out a story, you figure out what the beats are on a board, and then everybody takes a scene or two, and then you come together at 3:00 in the morning, and you put the whole thing together and you read it, and it's a piece of crap, but then you work through it page by page to try it, so that hopefully by 10:00 the next morning you have a script that's in English. And that's what we did the first week, and then we tried to get a jump on the next week's script and the next, until we were getting a lot of cooperation from the stage in those days. And then things began to change for us, the way they had changed for Chuck and Lee, and so it just became a bloody nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Our first week back after the hiatus, our first week back, we had it usually takes, I don't know, a month and a half or so to get a script up and on its feet so that it goes into production, and then you have a week of rewriting before you shoot it. Well, we had a script ready for that first table read on Monday, and that morning, I guess Sybil had read it earlier that morning. I'm not sure if I have the times exactly right, but she called and said that she got a bad haircut the day before, and that's what she would like this show to be about.
Okay.
And we're like, okay.
Okay.
And so that's what, and that's how you get. You're not just changing that week's script; you're affecting all of the scripts to come that are in the pipeline.
Well, how was it working with Christine Baranski?
She's lovely. She was. She is that type of actress that you. Ted Danson is this way too. And very few, I can say this about very few actors, but she is the type of actress that you give a line to that's mediocre, and you hear it come out of her mouth, and you go, I'm really.
She does funny enough, a show that Sybil also guest starred on the USA show Psych, which I'm a huge fan of. Sybil did a couple recurring episodes, but Christine Baranski does one episode where she plays this, again, high status matriarch who's had just too much work done, and her husband has died, and she's there trying to get them to figure it out. And she does this 3-beat joke over the course of the episode where the conversation is over, she wants to leave, and she's always behind glasses, and she just goes, door. And nobody gets it. And the way she says door the second time to indicate that they all need to open it for her is so Mary Ann, but it's that thing of they just wrote a word and it sounds like a symphony the way she decides to do it.
Yeah.
And it's my favorite part of that episode is every time she says the word door.
That's amazing. Yeah, she's that type. She also her this was a problem on Sybil because Mary Ann Christine would deliver a line, and it's she's first of all she's well trained and so resourceful in her ability to deliver a line. But when she delivers a line, it's with all sincerity. And we hit a certain point in the show where naturally a lot of the jokes were going to Christine, and somebody was not happy about that, and so we were told to change the script so that the star of the show got all the jokes. So we had to go through all of the scripts and change the punchlines for all these scripts, and then it goes to the stage on the first table reading after that, and it would be a setup line, and because Christine is so sincere in her setup line, she'd deliver this line that's not supposed to be funny, and the table would fall apart. Mm-hmm. And then the other person would come in with a sledgehammer and hit the line, and it was polite after. So Christine was very professional about the whole thing and tried to stay out of the mix. And unfortunately, I was sitting between the two of them when this finally broke. I think it was about one of the episodes that it was a scene where I forget what the episode was about, but it was a scene where Sybil comes into the living room and it's dark. And Sybil is a gun advocate. She comes into the living room and it's dark, and the other story going on is that they've got a mannequin or they've got something that's sitting on the couch.
Oh wait, I do remember this.
Do you? Yeah. I don't think it ended up no, it couldn't have ended up this way, because the first thing was Sybil takes out the gun and just blows this mannequin away, and we're at the table and talking, and I think it was Howard who said, well, I'm not sure if she would just blow it because she has 2 kids living in the house and her husband and she doesn't know who this is on the couch, and so maybe she wouldn't just blow him away. And oh yes, and I remember Sybil's solution was, well, maybe Sybil gives the gun to Mary Ann. Mary Ann shoots him, and Christine said, no, I really don't think I want to do that. I forget how it ended, but it was one of those bizarre conversations where you're going, I don't think you walk into a dark house and just your own dark house and start shooting people.
Everything that I read about Christine growing up, to me, was the example of professionalism. And I remember taking that into college, and I would have a phrase that sometimes I jokingly put on Twitter, but I do mean it, which is classy like Baranski.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good.
And anytime I felt that, because I felt when I was in college and I was in a show that I was a professional already, and I needed to practice that. And anytime someone who of course was acting like they were in college, was unprofessional, I would repeat in my head, classy like Baranski.
Good.
She's the best.
That was my thing. So.
And she works. I mean, she works, not afraid to work.
Well, and she's one of those people that's just been in so many things across generations. Mm-hmm. She's just constantly working and always popping. I mean, the Birdcage, and I remember seeing her on Broadway in Boeing, and she's kind of been in in our lives.
Yeah.
For decades.
There are people who don't know she did a sitcom.
Yeah. Because they know her too well for this.
Yeah, I've had that on Twitter.
Yeah.
Wait, Christine Baranski did comedy? Well, you haven't watched The Good Wife because she does comedy.
Yeah, I mean, she's the funniest part of The Good Wife.
But the fact that, like, she has these sort of sections of her career now, and she's so good at it that people forget, or don't know because they're too young, that she did other stuff. So you've written for a lot of strong women.
Why they terrify me.
Well, you also worked on
Mad About You.
Oh, Man About You, yeah. But you were there in '94.
Yeah. Great. A little bit of a crazy writing atmosphere. It was Paul was terrific, and Helen very professional. It was a little crazier than I like it to be. I think by the time we started the first script of the season, we only had half a script and no other completed scripts, which is bad.
Yeah, that's a rush to the finish.
Usually you try to have 7 or 8, and then you're just running in front of the train. But that was that, and it was there was a lot of miscommunication up at the top, and I wasn't up at the top. I was a lowly little producer guy.
But maybe as a final, there was one thing that really struck me on your website, because you've been writing novels now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And something for your recent novel, Heroic Heart, you wrote, "In the midst of great hardship, there is always funny."
Yeah.
Which is something we both agree with.
Yes.
If you maybe want to talk a little bit about that.
I think just pointing out a mistake a lot of baby writers make, is they think to be funny, you got to write funny. And I believe that to be funny, you need to write serious, and then just turn it a little at the end. And in my Heroic Heart, I mean, obviously that was in, a very sad situation, but there's an instance where, my dad, in the last couple days of his life, people were coming over to visit. It was like a big party. And, he had a breathing apparatus and a tank. And inevitably, someone would come in and sit down and talk with them, and they'd put their foot on the tube. And we corrected it a couple times, and then someone else comes in and they sit down and their foot is on the tube, and my dad takes his machine, he pushes a button, and he says, and it's a mechanical voice, it says, "Get your monkey foot off the hose." I bleeped myself, not very well.
It was great.
But just in general comedy, that's kind of dark comedy, which I found because I did Hill Street and St. Elsewhere years and years ago, and I did both ride-alongs with cops and spent a bunch of time in an ER in Burbank, and they all have a really dark sense of humor. And they have to. You have to deal with some of the situations they do. And I think it's the idea that you can come up with something funny and make it funny is not funny. There's not enough weight to it. If there's not enough weight or truth to it, then there's nothing to twist.
I think it's what we were talking about with Christine Baranski, was the sincerity.
Absolutely.
Is what sells it. We talk about as actors that if you're doing comedy, you take it just as seriously, if not more seriously, than when you do drama.
Truth in comedy.
Yeah. You laugh at the fact that these people are so truly in this moment, especially situational comedy.
Yeah.
Madeline Kahn said sometimes you have to feel pain to be funny. Although she was thinking more towards acting, but she was very serious.
Yeah.
In fact, I think someone said that sometimes she wouldn't know why she was funny, because she was taking it very seriously. Why were they laughing?
Two things. First of all, Danny DeVito, Louis De Palma on Tax, is a guy who, you look at that character, he does not think he's funny at all. His world is absolutely serious because he has tunnel vision and he doesn't see the big picture. And that's a problem with a star who's in charge of the show, is they're in charge of the big picture as well as the little picture. And that is a recipe for disaster, or for unfunny. But Louis just, that classic scene in Taxi where he's gone to apologize to Elaine for spying through a peephole at her in the bathroom, and he apologized. She says, "Louis," he says, "I'm sorry. Is that what you want? I'm sorry." She says, "Louis, that's not a sincere apology. It's not gonna, because he's gonna get fired." And then some more dialogue, and then he goes into this story about how he always has to go to the kids section of the store to buy clothes, and it's embarrassing, and he always gets asked these horrible questions, and it's one of the hardships of his life, and the whole thing is very sincere. And Elaine says, "Louis, that's what I was talking about. Thank you. And she hugs him. And then he hugs her back, 1001, 1002. He drops his hand down to her ass.
That part I remember.
Yep.
I remember the episode with that.
He's such a perfect example of that. I forgot the other one I was gonna mention, but it'll hit me. There were a lot of really interesting ways to go about getting to jokes. Everybody has their own. But one of the things I see in students a lot, baby writers a lot, is going for the joke above the story. And it's something I see kind of in people who are really, really good at jokes, is they tend to put a lot of weight on the jokes that they've put in the script.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it hard to change the story if you have to change the joke, because they're reluctant to change the joke because they did such a good job on the joke. So the story ends up warping to meet the joke, and then the whole thing goes away. It doesn't work.
This has been so great, Russ.
I'd love to ask in closing.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's been great, and I know that we need to let you go, but before we do, if you can, I'd love to hear any thoughts you have about the revival and things you would like to see or have wondered about that these characters might go through.
Sorry, say that again because I talked right over you.
How dare you?
I'm sorry.
How dare you, ma'am?
I'm thinking of the editing.
How
say it again.
dare you, ma'am? No, I'd love to know what kind
That's
of...
horrible. You would talk over her like that.
Yes.
Oh.
See, now you can't cut it.
Particularly because it's hard for me because I got to edit that.
Really, it's about her.
That's all I'm thinking about.
her editing.
I'm half listening to you and going, can I edit that?
Lauren, hush. I would love to know what thoughts or ideas you might have for the revival, if there's anything you've wondered might happen to them.
Are you right on the staff or not? Or can you not say?
I'm going to write a script from here, and we'll find a way to send it out.
Oh, that's great. Oh, so you will be involved.
Oh, maybe that internet email thing, maybe?
I think that may have gone by the wayside in a week.
Probably by the time we post this.
We've been speaking for so long. It's probably now. It's in the past.
Yeah.
It's not a thing anymore.
I beat Peterman.
Yes. We're using that to get everybody to stay on longer.
Exactly.
We're just going to goat them and go,
Steve talked a really long time.
Talked a lot longer than you.
Steve did?
Sign me up.
I read the pilot. I don't have many expectations at this stage of the game, and I've kind of learned not to have expectations going into a pitch session or anything else. I have a couple of stories that one of them I really like, which is probably put the death sentence on it. But it's tricky. I mean, most of these revamp shows, they're not so good. So hopefully, this will be a better shot at it. And interesting to see where everybody's come. And a few of these guys are dead now. Bobby Pastorelli is dead, and Pat Corley.
Mm-hmm.
And
Jay Thomas.
Yeah, Jay Thomas passed away in August.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't remember more about him.
It's okay.
I'll have to go see an episode. Then I'll talk about Jay.
Yeah, maybe when we get to one of his episodes.
We'll bring you back for Jay.
Corby says that when she listens to one of our episodes, it reminds her. Steve said he watched an episode and then stories come.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have to have something to remind you of the story. Yeah, we love that.
Yeah.
Well, we're actually, when you say that there are a few that have come out already and with varying success, one of the things that we want to before the revival starts is to look at the ones that have happened so far and see what seems to have worked, what seems to not. And also we talk about as fans how much ownership we have of if we're disappointed, why or why not, or if something really works, why or why not. And especially with this one, having so much of the original cast and creative team coming back makes us very hopeful, but also because they're coming in after several have already tried.
Yeah.
And they've got some lessons to already learn from. Yeah. So I'm very intrigued to see how this will go for them.
Will and Grace out here is great. Will and Grace, they did a great job.
They're doing well.
No, I think it's very good. Yes. And that's an interesting mix, too, because they have some of the original writers and then they have some new writers, which is my understanding is what you guys are going to be doing as well. I think it's smart. Is there anything that you can think of, any stories that we haven't covered? I mean, obviously, you're happy to come on and talk about anything else in the future.
I mean, personally, I'd love to have you on to talk about a specific episode.
Yeah.
At some point.
If there's one you'd like to pick, we'd be happy to.
Have to watch it.
We can make that happen.
I'll tell you about my Lincoln story.
Oh, I was reading about that on your website. That looks really interesting. We love history.
We do, actually.
Do. Yeah. Oh, this has been fascinating. I've been on it a couple of years, and it's just been absolutely fascinating. Every day I work on it, I spent about 7 or 8 months just researching before I even wrote anything.
Oh, that's a question I have. That's actually relative to something that I'm working on. I'm writing a play on, well, this is written, but on George Burns and Gracie Allen. So I am familiar with research versus writing.
Right.
What have you come across in, I guess, combating the idea of what actually happened and what is helping the story in a narrative way? Because I felt overwhelmed by the research, and very early on, not recently, I was like, oh, that didn't happen. And then I had to let go of
being
that.
So true to it.
Yeah, that is impossible.
Well, I had to make up I did make up one element in this story. It's an expansive story. It's eight part limited series, half hour each. And that is a curious problem. I mean, I always feel like, you got to kind of make it up yourself as you go along. I made up one element out of several, but I found so many funny incidences that actually happened. And I didn't want to twist the story to get to one just because it was funny, but I found I could include a lot of them to get in along. The basic reason I found there was a story was that this guy, Hannibal Hamlin, the vice president, was always a big advocate against slavery. Lincoln, on the other side, was kind of namby-pamby about it for the first couple of years of his presidency. And then yet, now we think of him as the great emancipator, and Hannibal Hamlin is forgotten. And so I went 20 years away from 1865 and saw Hamlin again before he died to sort of play that out, was he bitter or not, or, and I found so many things to support that. And that's just the core of what the story is. So along the way, there were little things about, Lincoln. I love the story. Lincoln he used to love to sign pardons at the end of the day. And so his secretary brings in one and he says, this pardon for a kid who's going to be executed. He deserted his regiment. Lincoln had a lousy marriage. We all know that. Mm-hmm. He says he deserted his regiment to run away. He went back home and he married his sweetheart. And Lincoln looks at it and he goes, well, I'll sign it, but I have a feeling in a year or two he's going to wish I hadn't.
I mean, that's a joke that still plays.
Yeah. But you can include that, and then the rest of the scene, there's another scene where he talks about, he was a big fan of John Wilkes Booth. So I have him coming back from the theater and just talking about how great this actor is. And then the next part of the scene is more on story when Hamlin shows up and, Hamlin didn't, Lincoln basically ignored him. Hamlin, the thing that got me interested in the story was Hamlin in the middle of the Civil War in 1864. He says, screw it. He joined the army and he became a cook at a fort in Maine while he was sitting vice president. And I thought, all right,
I actually shouldn't be surprised. They didn't take the job as seriously.
No, they didn't.
I mean, not seriously as in the job, but like it didn't seem to be as high,
Well, they're also they weren't being watched.
Yeah, or
there's a little more freedom.
Assassinated as much.
Until.
Well, while he was in that fort, Lincoln was almost killed twice by gunfire. He went out. I'll go through this quickly, but Lincoln heard there was a battle out at Fort Stevens, which is the top of Washington, and they said the rebels are coming in. We need to get you and your family out to one of the boats on the Potomac. And Lincoln said, "There's a battle?" They said, "Yeah, out at Fort Stevens." He says, "I'd like to go see that battle." And they go, So they go out, and Lincoln is standing on a parapet, which is one of the earthen walls that surrounds the fort. He's standing.
I know that because of Hamilton.
Oh,
I know that because my dad would take me to old forts and we'd talk about history.
There's a line in Hamilton when they say parapet.
Really?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, that's great.
I know that before Hamilton?
I know, sorry. I know history, though.
Oh, my goodness.
I didn't know it before Hamlet.
I just actually liked history.
She's always smarter than me on the show.
I'm not.
They're standing on this big wall and watching the battle take place, and the guy standing right next to Lincoln was a surgeon, and he gets his leg blown out by a rebel bullet.
Oh.
And everybody scrambles for cover except for Lincoln, who's standing there. He's like 7 feet tall with the thing, and he's watching, and snipers have now spotted him, and they're shooting at his head. And somebody says, "Mr. Lincoln, get down, or I will have you forcibly." And it's the general. He reaches up, he grabs Lincoln's arm, and he pulls him down. And Lincoln finally sits down, and I swear to God this is true. He finally sits down, and he says, "Yeah, I thought I was the commander-in-chief."
He was funny.
Yep. Yeah.
He's very funny. Yeah. So
he's a sassy man.
I love this history stuff. It's
really
interesting.
It was my favorite subjects.
Mm-hmm. It's all storytelling. I mean, it's all stories. It's how we came here. When you talk about research and adaptation into fiction, the thing that usually happens is just truncating the action for the stakes. Especially the older you get, the longer it took for things to happen. I mean, you just have to get the message there a little bit faster. You just need the events to happen a little bit closer together, and sometimes in the same moment to speed along the interest.
And
because
sometimes you have to cut things and merge characters. This is not about history, but my favorite story that I always would think of while I was writing the play was, you may know this, it's an Emma Thompson story.
I probably know.
Where she was on a plane with someone and happened to mention that she was adapting Sense and Sensibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the one was like, talked about her favorite character, and she was like, "Oh, I had to cut her.
I had to cut that one."
And she didn't speak to her for the rest of the flight.
Yep.
Because there were too many sisters, so she made them all.
Yeah.
Not the was like, I think it was the brother had a bunch of sisters.
Yes. Yeah.
And so she just made them one
into one character.
Yeah, or took them out or something. And so
it happens a lot with the adaptation of that particular story.
Yeah. Well, sometimes there's just too many people. You got to make a composite character.
I had someone say to me, "This is a historical piece, so what? There's not much to do, right? You just write it down."
Oh God.
That's so wrong.
And I wouldn't talk to them.
Well, my problem was probably doing the research because I wrote a vomit draft first based on one book that I had read, which is my favorite book on Gracie Island growing up. And then I thought, maybe I should do some research.
Oh, no.
And I went to the Performing Arts Library, and then it was like an HBO miniseries.
There was too much information.
I just sort of whittle it down, and it was like, no one's going to see a 4-hour play, Lauren. So.
Well, that's what I have 70 Lincoln books at home, and that's what I was up against too. Is just, and then you just do the scattergun thing. You just read here, and things that stick. You keep. But I was going to tell you, I met George Burns years ago.
Oh, you did?
Yes, he had an office down below me in Hollywood, and I went down. My wife was here, and her aunt was here, and so took him downstairs, and we went. And his assistant was out in front, and his assistant, like a young guy in his mid-70s, I guess, and said, we wanted to meet George Burns, and George Burns would come in for like 2 hours a day and sit at the end of the gigantic office, sit at the end of it in his director's chair, smoke cigars. So we went in and met, and he had like cigar ashes all down the front of him. And then I went back a couple days later, and I talked to his assistant, and he said, because I collect memorabilia, and I said, I'd like to have one of his old cigars, one that he smoked.
Oh,
And
wow.
I thought, we're going to get thrown away. The guy goes, well, come on. So he takes me back in George's office, and he digs through the garbage, and he pulls up a cigar, and now I have a George Burns cigar.
Oh, that's great.
That's awesome.
So when was this? How old was he at the time?
He was right near the end. It would have been 95 or so. I think he died in 96.
He did, and then he fell in the shower, unfortunately, and hit his head, so it was probably maybe right before he hit his head. Because after that, he wasn't in public anymore. It was sad.
Yeah. Funny stuff, though.
Yeah,
Oh, God,
no.
it's one of my favorite movies, too.
It's so good.
Way past the...
Yeah, no, and he loved a good story, so sometimes he tells the same story several different ways. He's a bit of a liar, and so sometimes I go, I have 3 different versions of the story. I'll just pick the one I like.
Mm-hmm.
There you
that's
go.
Also helpful. Yes, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you for taking the time out.
Thank you, guys. It was fun, and I'll be happy. I'll view some videos next time because I forget stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we have tons of episodes to get
Yes,
through.
we do.
Okay. Great.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.